The way I think of trauma is anything that is too big, too fast, too soon, too hurtful, or too little for too long.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast. My name is Nancy Moore, and I am the host of this weekly podcast that provides career and creative inspiration to help you build a passionate and purpose-filled life. You'll hear from guests that will help you tap into your creative potential, pursue a career with passion, and build on your biggest and best resource, yourself. I'm excited to have you join this conversation. I'm so happy you're here. Let's get started. With May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I thought it would be good to visit with somebody who helps others with their mental health. And I was recently connected through a mutual friend and met Pam Nelson. And Pam is a therapist and the founder of Yoga for Anxiety in Tulsa. And it was during her years working as a child therapist that Pam had a light bulb moment, and she realized she needed to go to the source of the issues facing children. And that's by helping their parents heal from their own childhood trauma. And so by doing so, this creates a new story and a fresh, healthy way to approach raising their own children. And so that cycle is not being repeated. Pam works with men and women to help heal them from trauma that sometimes has been passed down to family members through generations. And so this visit will share more about the importance of how healing will directly affect your mental health, and you're going to learn some expert tips on achieving peace in your mind and body. And so I am happy to welcome Pam Nelson to this discussion. I am so happy to have Pam Nelson with me on the podcast. She is a therapist and founder of Yoga for Anxiety here in Tulsa, and she was recommended by a mutual friend of ours to be on the podcast. So I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Good. So if you would just start out by telling us a little about yourself and then what interested you in pursuing a career as a therapist.
Sure. So I am a licensed mental health therapist here in Tulsa, and I also am a trauma-informed yoga therapist and have a private practice here. Yeah, so what got me interested in therapy? My first job in the mental health field was at a emergency children's shelter in Stillwater, Oklahoma, Payne County Youth Center. And it was a crisis shelter for children who had been removed from their homes for abuse or neglect, who had maybe been in a foster care home and for some reason could no longer continue to stay there. Or maybe there was just a lot of high conflict in the family and the family needed a break, the child needed a break. And so they would come stay with us. And it was located in a house, a home had been donated to Payne County. And so the kids would come there and we would just care for them like they were our own children. We would cook big meals and, help them with their everyday activities and get them off to school. And I just saw the pain that these kids were in and the constant state of survival they were in. Their nervous systems were constantly either in fight or flight, or they were shut down all the time. And so I tried doing like skill building groups, teaching them things like conflict resolution and, some of the things I had learned in school with my bachelor's degree in psychology and just everyday life skills. And it was nice, but I realized that I was just sort of putting a Band-Aid on much, much deeper wounds. And so that really just broke my heart. I would see these kids come and go and just be in so much pain and never know what had happened to them after they left the shelter. And so I decided to go back to school and pursue a master's degree in community counseling and counseling psychology. And become a therapist so that I could help them do deeper work.
Okay. Yeah. Before we get too far into it, I would love for you to share a little bit about your own personal story too, because you have also had some trauma. And so you are not new to that. And,
Right.
I think that makes you very relatable to the people that you're working with. But would you mind sharing a little about that as
Sure.
well?
Sure. Yeah. I have had a relationship with anxiety pretty much my entire life. Since I was a little girl, I can remember being extremely anxious and having what I now know are panic attacks from a very, very young age. And, anxiety runs in my family. I did experience childhood trauma and then also several very traumatic grief instances in my adult life, a lot of loss. And so I struggled with anxiety for my entire life. And as a young adult, I was at a point where I was almost agoraphobic, which means you have difficulty even leaving the house because you're so anxious and so afraid of the world. And, I did seek out help for that. I sought out mental health therapy. A wonderful therapist named Jane Vantine, who's here in Tulsa, retired now, and we still speak today, which is lovely as professionals now. But yeah, I sought out therapy from Jane, and she, in session, did a lot of breathing exercises, and she did just kind of body relaxation exercises. And one day she asked me, "Have you ever been to a yoga class?" And so, because of her kindness and her encouragement to try yoga, I tried my first yoga class. And the experience that I had in that class for just about 2 or 3 minutes, for the first time in my entire life, I experienced just peace in my body. Peace in my body, peace in my mind. My mind slowed down from the racing thoughts. My body actually relaxed. And I just had this little snapshot of what that could be like. And it was just one of those points where that you have in life where nothing will ever be the same after that moment. And so I remember thinking, I don't know what the heck just happened to me in there, but I have to figure it out and I have to use this in my life. And then now I use it to help other people. So that's how it all began. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible that her suggestion, and she sounds like she's so knowledgeable, but her suggestion has set you on a whole different path.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
Completely changed my life.
Yeah.
So,
Charted a new course. Okay. That's really cool to hear a little bit about, how yoga came into it, because I wondered about that. And so the yoga classes that you have, are they like specific to men and women? And tell me a little bit about the yoga classes.
Yeah. So I teach trauma-informed yoga therapy. And so, I have taught in public yoga studios around town and everything. And generally at a public yoga studio, there's a lot of focus on form and alignment and basically learning how to do the specific poses, learning the correct, way to do those poses. There's a lot of thought put into the sequencing and the music you're playing and all those things. And the yoga tends to be pretty westernized, meaning it's a lot of focus on fitness and strength and things like that, which is lovely and wonderful and definitely has a beautiful place in our lives. Trauma-informed yoga is a little different because we don't care what you look like. We don't care if you are moving with the group or not. We care about how the movement and the breath and the stillness feel in your body. And I just kind of think of it as you are coming into the room and experimenting with movement and breath and stillness and seeing what feels right for you, and hopefully trying to find a pattern of that helps you access that peace that I talked about that I was able to experience.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I say is a suggestion, not a command. And I just try to give people some ideas and guidance, but they move and breathe however they would like in my classes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. I know what you're talking about with the Western style, I guess, or Westernized yoga, because I attend yoga classes. But I would love to see what yours are like, because I think they would be very different. But the breath is so critical to those practices, and being able to hold poses and, that kind of thing. And it's amazing to pair the breath with, the feelings that people maybe have with feelings of anxiety and getting anxious and nervous or stressed out, and how much the breath can help
absolutely
in those situations. And so learning those techniques, I think, can be life-changing.
Absolutely. And since I really focus on helping people that really struggle with anxiety, there's a lot of focus on noticing how different patterns of breath and movement help us slow down the racing thoughts, how they help us release tension from the different parts of our body that tend to tense up whenever we're having that anxious fight or flight response, or helping the body kind of gently wake up out of the states of shutdown and disconnection and dissociation that happens for some people with trauma. So that's another big part too, is not just let's all move together in this yoga sequence, but when I move this way, what happens to my mind? When I move that way, what happens to my heart rate? What happens to my shoulders? So that they can then take those tools and use them outside of class when their mind starts racing or their heart starts racing or the panic attack's about to begin. They can use some of the tools they're learning in the trauma-informed yoga classes.
Mm-hmm. I love how you've paired that together.
Yeah.
With health, I feel like a lot of times it's just one thing, and you really need to think about the whole person.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like just incorporating the yoga side of it has probably been wildly helpful for your clients.
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to kind of dive in to understand a little bit more about trauma therapy. And so if you could just share a little bit more about that specifically.
Sure. So I utilize different methods or modalities of therapy to help trauma survivors. So we usually begin with learning some of those skills that I just spoke about to help regulate their nervous system and get out of those states of panic or shutdown and feel more calm and confident, and trust themselves to be able to calm themselves when they need to. And then once people feel pretty confident about that, then we usually begin some of the trauma work. And so I utilize EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's a mouthful, and that's why we say EMDR. But it is basically a method of therapy that helps desensitize some of those really traumatic memories and help you have less intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, panic attacks surrounding some of the more difficult life events that you may have been through. So EMDR is very helpful for that. And then I usually combine that with a modality called somatic parts work. So somatic meaning in the body. So noticing in the body maybe how we are carrying different parts of ourselves that learned these protective mechanisms, protective ways of protecting us through the different things that we experienced in our life. So it could be maybe that, like I personally have an angry part that comes out sometimes. I think we all probably do, but I have an angry part of self that is very fiery, very passionate, that comes out whenever maybe I get a little too close to those really harder feelings of grief, those more tender feelings of grief. And so sometimes, that angry part will come out to protect from the tender grief. And so we have all kinds of different parts that hold maybe a lot of shame, parts that hold guilt, parts that learn to maybe be very high functioning and work really hard in the world and have a lot of success and produce a lot. And that keeps us away from maybe feelings of like worthlessness or helplessness. So yeah, so we kind of go back and see what parts of myself are present that I would like to help. For me, help that angry part relax back and maybe be able to explore in a very safe way those feelings of grief. And how can I help those parts learn maybe different roles, different ways of being, so that, maybe my angry part keeps the passion and keeps the drive, but maybe is a little less snippy with people. So
I want to take a short break to share my next live event. It's a live podcast event called Conversations with Passion and Purpose on Friday, May 9th from 11:30 to 1 in Tulsa. My special guest is going to be Muriel Juneberry Berrien. She is the creative mastermind behind Strawberry Shortcake and the Care Bears. She's best known for bringing her beloved characters to life, and for her fun kitchen dances on social media. Muriel will share the story of her artistic journey from the early beginnings to creating some of the most iconic characters in pop culture. So this conversation, you will hear how she stays inspired, her daily habits that set her up for success, and how her positive outlook has shaped her life and career. Whether you're an aspiring artist, a fan of her work, or simply looking for a dose of creativity and motivation, this is an event you won't want to miss. This is a room that you will want to be in. The women are incredible. The conversations and connections are amazing. And I would love to see you connect, learn, and grow through this conversation. So to purchase tickets, go to sharingpassionandpurpose.com, hit the event link, and you will be able to purchase tickets. And I would love to see you there. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you've done some additional work, some additional maybe training. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was interesting. So is it the somatic and the EMDR? Am I saying both of those
you are.
correctly?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So is it that you have seen great results with that you've brought into your practice then?
Absolutely.
As well?
Yeah. And it was sort of just becoming a therapist and realizing the places that were lacking in the education that I received. I received a wonderful education with my master's degree, but as I started providing therapy services, at first it was just realizing how dysregulated people's nervous systems were. And there's no amount of talk therapy, talking out your problems and processing through your problems that are going to help rewire the brain to get out of survival mode. So that's where the yoga therapy, trauma-informed yoga, came in, and started implementing that, and then realizing that even just the talk therapy was not necessarily effective in reprocessing some of those really very traumatic wounds that were causing, like I said, the flashbacks, panic attacks. So that's where in EMDR therapy, I sought that. And then the parts work, just being able to recognize that even after doing the reprocessing and people being able to say, yes, I don't necessarily have the flashbacks anymore. I feel more regulated altogether, but I'm still carrying this shame or whatever emotion it was, or I'm still responding to different situations in this way. And that's where the parts work came in. So noticing that people were almost like they had polarized parts to themselves, parts that felt very calm and confident. They had reprocessed their trauma, but there was still this part hanging around that carried a lot of shame, worthlessness, guilt. So yeah, it's just been, my brave clients coming to me and realizing, okay, I need to learn more. I need to learn more in order to help this person. And so I would just seek out the education to be able to do that for them.
Mm-hmm. And when you say brave clients, I think how wonderful, because they're making such an investment in themselves to be able to work through what they need to work through to better themselves and better themselves for their families as well.
Absolutely.
So I'd love for you to also define what you deem as trauma. Just because I want to be on the same page, I want people to understand maybe what trauma is. I know that there are different forms, and so maybe for people who are maybe thinking that this might be a good option, I'd like for you to kind of share a little bit more about that.
Sure. So it's a great question, because I think that a lot of times when people hear the word trauma, they think of horror, which it is. Trauma definitely can be horrific events, really terrible events that happen to us, like domestic violence or abuse, neglect, things like that. That's absolutely trauma. But I think kind of a broader definition of trauma, the way I think of trauma, is anything that is too big, too fast, too soon, too hurtful, or too little for too long. So even too little, not getting enough of what you need for too long. So this could even be things like being put into roles that were too much, that maybe you were too young for, being sort of an emotional support to your parents or a caregiver to your siblings at too young of an age, where you didn't have the intellectual or emotional capacity to be able to do that. And so that would be incredibly overwhelming and dysregulating to your nervous system. And so things like that over the course of time can still wire our brains to be in survival mode, just the same way that a big horrific, one-time event could wire your brain to be in survival mode. So it's very often, and I would say especially with clients maybe my age and up, so I'm 47, and so clients my age and up, the younger generations seem to have a better grasp about what trauma is, but people my age will often say, well, I haven't been through any trauma, I don't know why I'm so anxious. But then we sit down and talk, and they have what my definition of childhood trauma is, chronically. So again, a lot of events that exceeded their capacity to cope, where they didn't know what to do. I will often ask people, well, who did you turn to when you had a problem? Who did you go to for comfort when you were a kid? Who did you go to when you were upset? And if they just kind of shrug their shoulders, then that would definitely be traumatizing.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm older than you are. So yeah, I'm glad you defined that. Okay. So I might ask how childhood trauma shows up in adulthood.
Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing that I will notice is just that nervous system dysregulation. So what I mean by that is people that they'll say, well, I'm never calm, or I'm never feel really fully relaxed. I'm always feeling anxious. I'm always just waiting for the next shoe to drop, next thing to go wrong. They have a lot of what if thoughts all the time. What if this happens? What if that happens? And basically, they're always kind of thinking into the future about what the next catastrophe could possibly be. Or they are shut down a lot, kind of frozen, where their mind's racing, but they can't seem to get up and get motivated to do things. And people will say that's procrastination or laziness. And to me, that's nervous system dysregulation. That's being in a freeze state, and which is a survival state. So, or being completely shut down, being numbed out physically, emotionally. And all of those nervous system states are responses to either a real or perceived threat. And that's how our brain protects us, that when we feel like that there is a threat right in front of us, or even just a scary thought that pops into our mind, we will either go into fight or flight or freeze or fold in order to either run from the danger, fight the danger away, or get still and quiet and hide from the danger. So when you've had chronic trauma in childhood, your brain gets wired to stay in those states so that you can protect yourself. So oftentimes in adulthood, then we're still in either that anxious or shut down state. So that's usually the first way that I notice people, it shows up in adulthood. And then also struggling in relationships. A lot of childhood trauma survivors have never really been taught healthy conflict resolution or boundary setting. And so they tend to have a lot of struggles, either friendships, romantic relationships, and even work relationships. Our work dynamic often mimics kind of a family dynamic. You have a boss who's the authority. And, so oftentimes people, that will create a lot of dysregulation, just going to work every day. So sometimes you'll have people that really are overachievers and overwork, or really have difficulty with the administration at their work, are very anxious about being around the administration at work, different things like that. So, and then I think difficulty in having a sense of self, just knowing who you really are. A lot of childhood trauma survivors had to spend so much time focusing on everyone and everything outside of them to survive. So whether that was focusing on an abusive parent to watch their tone, watch their mood, to make sure that it was going to be a safe day, to see if it was going to be a bad day or a good day, or even trying really hard to perform, achieve for maybe a very highly critical parent, or just whatever situation the person was in, that they were trying to be pleasing to others in order to stay safe. They had to spend so much time thinking about everyone around them and keeping everyone around them happy, or at least at bay, that they never really learned how to tune into themselves, how to say, well, how do I feel about this? Or what do I want? Or what do I need? Or what do I even like? And so when you ask sometimes people, what do you do for fun? They'll just kind of shrug, like, I don't know. Or well, my husband likes to do this, or my child likes to do this. And he said, but do you enjoy that? and a lot of times people just aren't really sure. They've never really considered themselves.
That's so interesting. Okay. Okay. So what would you say would be some tips that others can take action on and implement today that would help them? Because we're talking, for Mental Health Awareness Month. Do you have one or two things that maybe you could share that would be helpful for people, that would be takeaways from this conversation?
Sure. So I do a lot of the somatic parts work. We also sometimes call it inner child reparenting, and do a lot of reparenting work with my clients. And so one of the most simple, just very practical things that I'll often teach people in the very beginning is to ask themselves multiple times throughout the day, maybe set an alarm on their phone for every couple hours, and ask themselves 3 questions. And those are, do I need to go to the bathroom? Am I hungry, or do I need something to drink? And do I need rest or comfort right now? And that may sound kind of simple and silly, but there is so often that we, again, ignore those natural needs that we have and just push through. Well, I'll eat later, I'll go to the bathroom later, or I'm fine, I don't need anything, I don't need any comfort right now. But those are the very, very basic needs that a loving parent would provide to an infant. And so when we begin this process of reparenting, it's being able to go back and give ourselves the things that we never received, the love and the care that we needed and never received as a child. We can begin that process now, giving that to ourselves now. So instead of ignoring these natural needs that we have, I encourage clients to maybe place a hand on their heart and just say to all parts of them, don't worry, I'll take care of you. And then get up, go to the bathroom, get something to drink, and or whatever it is that they're needing in that moment. And that really starts to develop trust in yourself and trust with all parts of you that you will take care of yourself now, that someone is taking care of you now.
And who better to take care of yourself than you?
Yeah.
Make yourself a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this has just been a great conversation. Okay. So in wrapping up, I would love for people to kind of hear the options for working with you, because you've even acknowledged, therapy could be, an expense that maybe others can't afford.
Right.
So if you could share kind of how people can work with you, and then, who are inside and outside of the Tulsa area.
Sure. So for people that are residents of Oklahoma, I do offer teletherapy. So that's online therapy. So anywhere in the state of Oklahoma, I'm licensed to be a therapy provider. So for people in Oklahoma, I do individual therapy sessions and so that's the trauma-informed yogic practices, EMDR, somatic parts work. We can do all of those in individual therapy. And then for Tulsa residents, I have trauma-informed yoga classes, or Tulsa area residents, I should say. I have trauma-informed yoga classes with the yoga, breathwork, meditation, grounding. And I also have some group therapeutic options. So we do yoga, but then we also do a lot of trauma and anxiety education, and then connection with other survivors that are going through the same thing or have anxiety themselves and really understand what that's like. And then for people that they're out of the state, out of the area, and or could not afford the individual or group offerings, I have a online self-study that people can do. And it has, again, the yoga, a lot of inner child reparenting work, just very simple exercises that they can begin immediately implementing into their everyday life. And then lastly, I have a trauma-informed yoga online video websites, on-demand video websites that people can access. And if people have absolutely nothing, they can follow me on Instagram. And I do try to offer just some hope and inspiration and understanding, and some tips that they can begin to utilize. So everything from free to the individual therapy.
Okay, and that's yoga for anxiety, right?
Yes, yoga for anxiety, or yoga.for.anxiety on Instagram. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'll be tagging you too, but yes, thank you. So do people have to be attending therapy to go to yoga classes?
No.
Okay. That could be a separate thing.
It absolutely can. I generally recommend that eventually, people, I think both tools are very, very useful. And I think that the trauma-informed yoga can be a wonderful supplement to therapy for people that are maybe already in therapy with someone else, especially if your therapist maybe doesn't offer the somatic practices. So if you're doing this wonderful work with talk therapy and processing through your trauma, but you're still feeling the anxiety in your body, this can be a wonderful supplement. Or maybe for someone who maybe isn't quite ready for therapy, isn't quite ready for that more intensive trauma work, to be able to at least find ways to access peace in your mind and body, or at least get back to that place of peace, the yoga classes can be wonderful for that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so my final question is about my theme, Thrive in 2025. So I'm wondering what thriving means to you, and then how you're personally or professionally thriving.
So I absolutely love my work. I love my job. I love helping people, and I love being able to do individual therapy with people. And it's hard. It's very difficult sometimes to hear people's stories over and over again. And so I've decided in 2025 that I am going to be kind of expanding to do still absolutely see individual therapy clients, but instead of having, maybe 25 clients a week that I'm doing those individual sessions with, I'll have a smaller number of individual therapy clients, but offer more classes. And then another project that I'm really excited about is offering continuing education to other therapists and other social workers, so that they can learn some of these different somatic practices and tools, like the trauma-informed yoga themselves, so that their nervous systems can be regulated, so that they can feel more at peace more often, and they can sustain themselves through doing this really hard work. So I'm really excited about just kind of broadening out and being able to share these tools with other therapists.
I think that's wonderful. That's a great resource, especially for us in the Tulsa community. So I'm thrilled that you have that coming up too.
Thank you.
So yeah, well, thank you so much for visiting with me, Pam. I appreciate your time, and I love your heart for helping people, and I do think you're definitely in the right profession. So thank you for sharing more about that, and the trauma-informed, and even giving us tips. It's been awesome. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I appreciate you being here. And don't forget to connect with me on social media. Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn are at Sharing Passion and Purpose, and Twitter is at Passion Sharing. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.